time now for the award-winning #1 local talk show in Northeast Pennsylvania, The Sam Lesante Show. Now here's your host, Sam Lesante.
Folks, it's called seasonal affective disorder. I call it the winter blues. How many of us get this, feeling around the holidays, maybe depression, etc.? Today, my guest is a certified medical doctor, psychiatrist, Dr. Matthew Berger. I'm so happy to have him on the show. He's the director of the Senior Medical Mental Health Unit at Moses Taylor, and he is also has a private practice, and I'm going to give you his phone number. First of all, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show, Doctor.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
This is something that I wanted to address. Many people in northeastern Pennsylvania, I call it winter blues, you call it the seasonal affective disorder. Let's talk about some of those disorders, and maybe we can help a lot of people by what you have to say today. There's a few of them involved.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we have to realize is that there is a biological component, which is the true seasonal affective disorder. And that's a type of depression that looks like any other major depression that occurs traditionally starting around middle of September and will end by itself, essentially, beginning of middle of April, May. And it really has to do with sunlight and the lack of sunlight that we have in this area. Of course, it's all over the country, but we see it more in the Northeast and northern climes rather than in some of the southern climes where the weather is better and there's more sunlight. We believe that there's a direct component biologically of sunlight causing an increase in melatonin, which causes an increase in serotonin, which is one of the neurotransmitters that kind of helps you not be depressed. So that's a very circumscribed illness. It happens pretty much every year, and patients will tell you. It's just like clockwork. They feel great, their mood's good, they have energy and motivation, and right around the middle of September, they start to feel draggy, they have less energy, they feel like they want to hibernate, and their mood starts to become pretty down. And that correlates with sometimes patients who are depressed anyway, and then they have an exacerbation of their underlying depression caused by the lack of sunlight.
Okay, so now that's a medical condition.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so all right, so if we have, if people are going into this particular depression around these times, okay, what do you do for them?
Well, there's several things. I mean, first of all, good sort of mental health that we do anyway is always appropriate. But the particular treatments are actually a variety. One is something called a light box. A light box is a full spectrum, so it has to have all spectrums of sunlight. 10,000 lux, L-U-X, that's a unit of light output, energy, so to speak. And you have to use it about once to twice a day for about a half an hour, and it has to be 12 to 24 inches from your eyes. Now, you don't have to stare into it. It's not like, the Green Lantern's light that you have to focus at. It has to, however, be there. You can read or watch TV. And what it essentially does is it fools your neurotransmitters into thinking that it's July. And so you have the energy and the motivation and the pleasure that you normally would have had in July if you have this particular disorder. If that is ineffective, there are 1 or 2 antidepressant medications that are actually indicated for seasonal affective disorders. One of them is a medication called Wellbutrin or bupropion, which can be used for this.
Now, when a person gets in, what are some of the symptoms that a person would be looking at?
Well, first time, one of the symptoms we often see is hypersomnolence. This is where they tend to sleep many more hours. So instead of sleeping their normal 6 or 7 or 8 hours, now they're sleeping 8 or 9 and they're trying to take naps in the afternoon. Something called hyperphagia, which means they eat more, crave more carbohydrates. Something called anhedonia, which is a big way of saying you don't enjoy the things you normally would enjoy, especially like in our older folks. The grandkids are coming over and they're like, I don't care, I don't want to really be around them. Or if you enjoy skiing or whatever hobbies, all of a sudden they kind of leave you cold. And a general sense of being sad. Just life has no pleasure. You just feel sad a lot of the time.
And so that's when you recommend, this particular, either the medicine or...
We usually try to start with the light box because it's less invasive. Mm-hmm. You're not putting a pill inside you, and obviously medications can have side effects.
What do I do? Okay, we'll get into the psychological in a moment, but sticking with the fact that there are some people that just are depressed, okay, and a series of things happens, okay, whether it's a spousal problem, whether it's a family problem, whether it's a work problem, whether it's a friend problem or whatever, okay. What do? What are some of the things that we do to try to keep our mental health stable.
Well, I mean, I think, okay, now we're talking about generalized depression, which of course can worsen in the winter, but a general depression, there are several things about it. Number one, depression, the illness, tends to be familial. So if you have a first-degree relative, mother, father, brother, or sister, who's depressed, you have about a 1 in 4 to 1 in 5 chance of being depressed yourself, and it clearly runs in families. So if you're starting to manifest actual depression, again, now if there's a specific trigger, like you said, a spousal problem or a work problem, obviously we'd want you to get into some therapy. You know, do some talk therapy, something called cognitive behavioral therapy or DBT, some other treatments. And it's not really like the old days to a large degree. You're not lying on a couch and you're not talking about your mother or your father, you know, what happened 20 years ago. It tends to be much more focused on here and now problem solving and how do we get over that. If we don't see a significant solution with talk therapy, oftentimes, again, there are a variety of medications that are extremely helpful. And, you know, when we talk about medications, people tend to be very scared because of the older medications, especially some of your older folks may be used to some of the medications that were used 20, 30 years ago. There has been a huge, huge change in medications. They're much, much safer, much more tolerable in terms of side effects, and honestly much more effective than they were years ago.
You used the word here, talk therapy, and I think it's for those people who may be living alone or don't have that much communication. Would you suggest that these people talk to somebody? I mean, to communicate.
Well, I mean, one of the things we do know is whether you're depressed or not, isolation is very hard on human beings. We are not, for the most part, loners. We tend to be pack animals. We need the rest of our pack, like dogs or wolves or whatever. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think it's very important, especially as we get older, and oftentimes, you know, we're losing loved ones. You know, a spouse might pass away, a brother, a sister, our parents. I think it's very important to engage in social activities. I am a big believer in, you know, getting involved in your church group or a social organization, maintain a hobby, whether it be bridge or golf or dominoes, whatever sort of thing to get you out, get you amongst people, because interaction and socialization is extremely important in maintaining mental health.
All right, so a person's at home, they don't like to, you know, they're becoming isolated, you know, and all of a sudden, you know, the things in life are not as exciting to them as they used to be. You know, there's some kind of problem happening there, okay? So you suggest that nip it right at the butt, get involved with whatever you can get, whether it's family activity or whatever. When someone around the holidays, you said something that everybody, you know, you watch the Hallmark movies and you see these fantastic Christmases and, you know, on television and in movies, and you're envisioning that. And what did you say?
Well, I think it's really important to have realistic expectations.
Yeah.
Because those Christmases that you see on TV, I call them John Boy Walton Christmases.
Yeah.
You know, where everybody's in the woods and it's snowing and, you know, all the relatives are getting along great and everybody's having this, you know, singing Christmas carols.
Yeah.
The vast majority of us don't have that. The vast majority of us have, you know, several relatives who are fighting with each other, and, you know, my son is in California and can't come home, and the grandchildren are busy, and, you know, my uncle's too ill to come, you know, and so most of us, unfortunately, are not going to have what the media tells us we should have. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we feel like if we're not living up to that media perception of the holidays, somehow there's something wrong with us. You know, that we're the exception and everybody else around us is having this phenomenal holiday season.
Folks, I'm talking to Dr. Matthew Berger, who is a medical doctor and is a certified psychiatrist. I'm going to give you his phone number, folks, and don't hesitate to give him a call. He has a private practice. It's 570-346-3686. And we'll be back talking about psychological depression, how we ourselves sometimes get into a mood and it just gets worse and worse. We have to stop at one point in time and do something for those who have lost loved ones, those who have lost especially a child or a spouse. It gets pretty heavy around the holidays. What are we going to do to get some relief? Stay with us. Welcome back to the Sam Lesante Show, folks. Remember SSPTV.com. Every one of our shows are there. Our news, as you know, all the girls, all the shows that we produce are there. And my email is sam@ssptv.com. And for those of you who are in the Pottsville area on Comcast 7, We will be now on 190 starting January the 7th. So if you're watching this show after January the 7th, you know we're on 190. That's only for the Comcast area only. That's Comcast 7. We'll be on 190 starting January the 7th. My guest today, certified medical doctor, psychiatrist Matthew Berger, talking about the seasonal affective disorders, which I call the winter blues. I call them winter blues because, you know, when you can't get out, either the weather's bad, you can't mingle as much as you can. Psychological problems around the holidays. I don't know if the statistic is correct, but they say more suicides happen around the holidays. Is that correct, Doc?
We seem to see a higher rate of suicide in the Christmas, New Year season, and especially early January and December, yeah.
Now, what happens with suicides, and it always shocks a lot of people, okay, when, especially if you know the person, if they're a family member, there was no telltale signs, okay, what are some of the signs where it's really getting bad?
I think a lot of times there may be, some subtle signs that we're not picking up or that we choose not to pick up. I mean, first of all, most patients who have suicidal tendencies will give you some subtle clues. Oftentimes we'll see, again, isolation is a big one. The person who's usually involved, grandma calls me once a week to talk, all of a sudden she doesn't call for a couple of weeks. Oftentimes they'll start making arrangements. If suddenly grandma or grandpa or, a brother or sister starts giving away things, like, I want you to have my watch. Well, why? I just want you to have it. That kind of things. Or making arrangements. And they'll often start talking not so much about suicide, but maybe about death in general. So they're not maybe saying they're going to kill themselves, but all of a sudden they seem more upset with death and dying and, my Uncle Joe died and, what do you think about it? They'll start to give you those kind of cues. So you will see some subtle cueing, and oftentimes they will even say, especially unfortunately with older folks, we'll start to see them say, I feel like my life has been lived out. There's really no purpose anymore. Again, if they stop doing things that they really enjoyed doing in the past, and also non-future statements. What I mean by that is, well, in July we're going to go to Disney World. Oh, I don't know if I'll be around for that. Those kind of things. It's not a clear suicide, but they're making statements that they're not going to be around for that.
How bad does it get, okay, when you're talking about, let's get to the psychological now, where people maybe not thinking of committing suicide, but they get very, very sad around the holidays because they lost a parent, or they lost a child, or they lost a good friend, or the family is not, coming the way they should be, okay? So they start getting, again, depressed, okay? And they'll turn to maybe alcohol, they'll turn to different things to try to get some relief, okay? What do we tell those people that are suffering that way?
Well, I think it's important that you bring up alcohol. Because alcohol plays a tremendous role. Unfortunately, as you know, here in northeastern PA, there is a high degree of alcoholism. We have a high rate of alcoholism. And it's not just a young person's disease. It's, it can be in the older folks, where they may start out by self-medicating. I don't feel good, so I'll have a drink. And let me just say, not everybody who has a drink is an alcoholic. But when you start using alcohol as a coping mechanism, I'm feeling really sad, so I'll have 2 or 3 drinks. Or I just feel stressed, so I'll have 2 or 3 drinks. Or I'm lonely, so I'll have a couple of drinks. All of that is really negative kind of behavior around alcohol. And one has to remember that alcohol is a depressant. It actually biologically makes you sad. So if you're already sad to start with and you have a few drinks, it's going to make your depression worse. The other thing I want to talk about, especially I know you have quite a few older folks in your listening audience, is prescription drug abuse. And patients often don't think about it that way. It's not like they're out on the streets buying heroin or stuff like that. But oftentimes they'll have a prescription for some pain medicine that their doctor gave them for arthritis, or they had a surgery, and they'll start by saying, I don't feel so good, so I'll take a pill. And all of a sudden it becomes 2 and it becomes 4, and now they're using a pain pill every day or a couple of times a day, and they don't really have physical pain. But it makes them a little, for lack of a word, loopy or high, and they're not thinking of themselves as addicts, but they start to become self-medicating with prescription drugs. So you need to watch for that as well, especially in our older folks. And again, a lot of times our older folks won't express sadness as sadness. They'll express it as what we call somatic concerns, or physical. I have a headache that doesn't go away. I have a GI problem, stomach or bowel problem that doesn't go away. Or I'm nervous all the time. So a chronic pain that doesn't go away. and they'll go to the doctor and they can't find an underlying cause. Oftentimes that can be actually depression.
So what do people do around the holidays that they know if they lost a loved one, or they're turning to alcohol more than what they should be because they're fearing that they have to be either alone at Christmas time? What do people do? What suggestions?
Again, number one, definitely reach out to your mental health providers. There's Northeast Counseling in the Hazleton area through that organization. There's some private practices that will get you involved in some counseling, individual talk therapy, maybe medication. But again, this is where our community organizations and our support groups can be involved. Your churches, your synagogues, your family social services, your even political organizations, or your United Ways. There are a variety of different social service organizations, or even just clubs. It doesn't have to be a fancy organization. Whether you be a golfer or a tennis player or a bridge player, anything to get you engaged or involved. Read to children. Get involved in that. Become involved in some. A lot of our folks are quite healthy. Whatever organization that you can become a volunteer, volunteer at the hospital, go to a nursing home and do some, work there, get involved with the veterans organizations. Any of those things can really make you feel engaged and having a purpose. I'm a big believer in work. People say, I can't wait to retire. I say, I'll never retire. I'll part-time retire, but I need a reason to get up in the morning, put a jacket on, and feel productive. Whatever it is, try to feel productive.
And when you're talking about people, looking for some things, I know as the viewers I have, some of them have health issues, and that brings them to another situation. They have health issues, plus they don't have the families or the friends that they'd like to have, and it becomes just, how important is religion to these people?
I think religion is a very important aspect for our sense of community. I think unfortunately, or fortunately depending, our society has become very mobile. The extended family doesn't truly exist in most areas, where the cousins and the aunts and uncles and nieces all live within a 5-block or 5-mile radius. So I think oftentimes the religious component, and whatever religion, can provide that. It can give you that sense of community, that sense of belonging, where you go to church on Sunday or you go to synagogue on Saturday and you have friends there and relatives and a pastor or a priest or a rabbi who kind of looks out for you, stops in on you if you're sick, make pierogies, whatever it might be that you do with the organization. It all makes you feel like you're attached and part of a community, not just adrift in a lonely sea.
So what you're saying, Doctor, is be involved, get yourself to do something, okay? It's important to have a purpose and do something. Just don't stay there and stagnate, okay?
The worst thing you can do is stay in your own head.
Yeah, that's true. Folks, I'm talking to Dr. Matthew Berger. His phone number, 570-346-3686. He is a certified medical psychiatrist. He is the director of the Senior Medical Mental Health Unit at Moses Taylor Hospital. We'll be back right after this message. Thanks for staying with us, folks. Remember, if you're watching this on Comcast in the Pottsville area, we are going January 7th. We'll be on channel 190. My guest today is Dr. Matthew Berger. He is a certified medical doctor, a psychiatrist, and we're talking about seasonal affective disorder. And okay, so we have this seasonal, as you say, I call them winter blues. Okay, symptoms and signs.
Again, lack of interest, lack of pleasure in life, things that normally you would enjoy, excessive sleep, increased or decreased appetite. Sometimes your appetite goes way up and other times you have no interest in food. Lack of motivation and isolation. Those are the key things you really want to look for. Now with true seasonal affective, again, it's got that component of starts in the middle of September and ends in April.
Okay, now I'm playing the show, of course, around the Christmas holidays. I'm also going to play this show in January. Because we're in the dead winter, okay, and people are just now, if they had Christmas parties or if they had families together, now it's, oh boy, the lights are gone, it's really bad now, okay. At least I came in, I saw Christmas decorations or whatever. Now it's really bad, okay. What do I do?
Yeah, I think January, February are actually even worse than the holidays.
Yes.
Because I think that unfortunately, during the holidays, exactly what you said, you had a little something to look forward to lighten up the season. Mm-hmm. I think that's when it's really important to maintain a routine, to keep yourself involved, to, like, if you're going to the gym, try to go. If you're whatever you're doing, try to maintain a routine. The hibernation effect of that happens in January, February can be very negative.
I like to tell people to do happy things. Whether it's watching the Three Stooges or whether it's watching, something that's going to, make you feel better. Okay, the good thing about humor, laughter, they say,
Sure,
is
absolutely.
is so important. And so, is condition yourself if you can't get out of the house. What are some of the things you could do in the house, okay, that would make you feel good?
Well, again, you're absolutely right. One of the things I'm always concerned with is people spend all day long watching the news, whether it be CNN or Fox or MS, and the news can be very depressing.
Yeah, I know.
So you want to try to, remember to switch off the news and watch
And watch
something,
the Sam
something
Lesante show.
exactly,
Okay.
and watch something upbeat
Yeah.
and positive. If they're computer literate, I think that's a tremendous outlet for people who can't get out.
Yeah.
Whether it be Facebook or chatting or Twitter. And I know my mom's 87 and she just joined Facebook. So
God
you
bless
can
her.
do it at 87.
Yeah.
It's not something, and there's some great local colleges that will do free of charge adult education that'll help you hook up.
I also think it's important, and correct me again, you're the pro here. If you're daily basis, if you have a friend that you talk to, whether it's a family member or a friend, it's important to communicate as much as you can throughout.
Absolutely. Through phone or personal visits.
Yeah.
That human contact, we as people, as human beings, need other people.
Yeah. And sometimes people, again, they've suffered a loss, and you got to cope with that, okay? And that's the biggest problem, having people coping with those problems, okay? So you're saying, of course, his phone number, I'm going to give you his phone number, folks. It's worth a call. 570-346-3686 is Dr. Matthew Berger. Some things that you could advise people how to cope. What are some of the things?
Well, a lot of it's very sort of, I hate to say it, but common sense. We all have losses. A lot of those sort of trite sayings are sayings because they're true. Life does go on. Try not to dwell on the past. One of the things I've often seen is, unfortunately, with loss, people will create like a shrine to that person. I have every stitch of clothing my husband ever wore. Not a good idea. I haven't changed the house a bit since my wife passed. Not a good idea. It's I'm not saying day one get rid of everything, but over time, within a year or whatever, it's time to start to move forward. And a lot of times patients will feel that somehow they're betraying the person by doing that.
Yes.
That isn't the case.
Yeah.
You're not saying forget about them,
Yeah.
but you're saying I'm going to remember him, but at the same time I'm going to move forward with my life.
Yeah. You're so right. My father died of a massive heart attack, and we lived in Pardeesville, and in the house, and I had to get my mom out of that house because everywhere she went in,
Absolutely.
she saw my dad.
Terrible.
And however, now there's some people that just can't get rid of their home, but they could change things in the house.
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's
donate the clothes, donate the personal items. If he's got 3 winter coats that your husband or child or whatever who passed away wore, donate them to somebody who can use them.
Yeah.
And it's a good thing. It's a blessing. You're doing a good deed, and you're also moving forward with your life.
So there are opportunities out there to help people that have this seasonal affective disorder. Okay?
Absolutely.
Whether if it's mental illness, there's medication, or there's
light box.
The light box. Okay. If it's psychological, there's opportunities for people that can, little at a time, help themselves out. Correct.
Right, and there's some great psychologists and therapists who, if you can't do it on your own, will help you through the talk therapy.
Sometimes people feel like, I always say to myself, I got to go and see a psychiatrist. You need to check your head. You go and see a psychiatrist. Okay. Maybe that's the case. Maybe the case is you should see it. It's not demeaning by no means, or embarrassing.
It's normal life.
Yeah.
We all have trials and tribulations, and unfortunately, we all have things that we need some help coping
So how do you
with.
stay happy every day?
I wish I had the magic answer.
Come on, doctor.
I don't-
How do you stay happy?
You just have to try to move forward and to realize that the world is what it is and let go of things that bother you.
You need a sense of humor.
Absolutely.
And if you don't have a sense of humor, you have a problem, okay?
Absolutely.
And we're not perfect. God knows I made a lot of mistakes in my life. And, you just say, if you dwell on them, you'll go nuts.
Yes.
Okay? Well, doctor, I want to thank you so much for coming on the Sam Lesante Show. I hope to have you on again in the
Thank you.
near
Thanks
future.
for having me. Hopefully it was helpful.
Dr. Matthew Berger, folks, 570-346-3686. No reason, folks, it's not going to be an easy thing, but at least we could start somewhere to start having better mental health and surviving the the winter. Whether we look at the snow as, we should look at these negative things as make them positive to a degree, so we feel a little better about ourselves. And talk to people, get involved. You know, even if it's going bowling or if it's doing something, do something that you could enjoy yourself. Once again, folks, if you're watching us in Pottsville on Comcast 7, January 7th, we'll be on 190. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.